Hi, we're back again. This is the Kindergarten through 8th grade General Music PLC Topic 7, and this is segment 3. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about science alignment, as well as just general best practices for aligning music with any other subject area. So once again, I want to start on the Georgia Standards of the georgiastandards.org website. And I want to point out something that's a little different about the science standards. So whether you click on the science subtitle itself or you click on the grade level band, what I have found is that there's no one document that lists all the standards for all the grade levels in one single place where you can do that Control F function and find a specific skill or concept that is listed in the standards. However, I will tell you that the grade 1, grade 4, and grade 8 grade levels are the ones that have sound as a specific topic in their standards. So here is the 4th grade Georgia Standards of Excellence. There it is right there. And then if you scroll down a little bit farther, you can look at the different overall topics they're talking about. And there's light and sound right there in 4th grade. And again, it's also in 1st grade and 8th grade. Now, once again, and we'll talk about this in the best practices, that is not to say that you can only make that alignment and that connection in 1st grade, 4th grade, and 8th grade. But it is important to know when they're learning these concepts so that you can use that academic language and you can draw on those specific concepts. So I try not to use the word vibration when I'm referring to sound with my kindergartners because they might look at me like I'm crazy because they haven't learned that yet. Or maybe the concept of decibels and sound waves I'll use with my 4th graders, but then also my 5th graders, and I really won't use it before that grade level. So if you're ever interested to look at the specific standards by grade level about sound specifically, again, it's listed in 1st grade, 4th grade, and 8th grade. So here are some specific ways that you can make the connection and align science with music. The first and biggest one in my classroom, and we always talk about this constantly, is vibration. And we are constantly talking about how instruments that are bigger will sound lower and instruments that are higher will sound, or instruments that are smaller will sound higher. I do start this in kindergarten. I may not label it as vibration, but I do start talking about the concept of big is low and small is high, starting all the way in kindergarten, and it's constantly reinforced. I bring it in at the very beginning of the year, even before I start even naming the concept of high and low in my music standards. I kind of bring their attention to how some of the bigger instruments might sound different than the smaller instruments, and then we'll really focus on it when we get to the concept of high and low, and then we'll reinforce that throughout the rest of the year and throughout every grade level. That's a really, really big one. We'll also use vibration to talk about how to play an instrument and how an instrument is played. So I talk about this a lot with my xylophone technique, for example. We talk about how if we take the mallet and make it stick to the bar is not going to vibrate, but if we let it bounce off the bar, then the bar gets to vibrate. And then we talk about how the materials might affect the vibration. So my metallophones will vibrate for longer than my xylophones, or my triangles will vibrate for longer than my rhythm sticks based on the material that it's made out of. We do a lot of echo song and echo teaching, and so I have in the past pulled videos from YouTube, for example, to show them an actual echo happening in nature, like off the side of a mountain. And this is kind of connected to vibration. And so by showing them the actual natural version of what an echo is, it can kind of reinforce what a musical echo should be and should sound like. In 8th grade science specifically, they talk about how sound waves travel through various materials, and they specifically talk about the scientific concept of echo. So that's interesting to note that it does show up in the 8th grade standards. Again, not to say that you can't kind of lightly cover that concept in your music class, but know that if you are teaching a general music class to 8th graders, that they are learning that concept in their science class. We talk about decibels for dynamics, which is a example I gave with the georgiastandards.org website. There are tools out there that can actually measure the sound level of a class or of any sound source and tell you what the measurement is in decibels. So that is a cool experiment to do, like when you're teaching dynamics. Another way that you can bring in science is the anatomical functions of singing. So I do this with my chorus. We talk about the diaphragm, we talk about the lungs, we talk about the vocal cords and the sound box in our mouth and how to create that space for more acoustical vibration and space. We talk about how our posture affects our breathing. There's a lot of anatomical connections with singing. And I do it a lot with my chorus, and I do it with some of my other grade levels as well, just in my general classroom. So this is a good way that you can bring in that science and that science concept. We talked a little bit earlier about the instrument materials in construction, and this kind of goes along with the next topic of classifying your instruments. So the aerophone, idiophone, quarterphone, membranophone. And classification is a skill that spirals throughout the science curriculum. So they're constantly classifying insects or plants or rocks or any kind of different materials. So classification of aerophone, idiophone, quarterphone, membranophone may not be, those 4 vocabulary words may not be specifically in the science curriculum, but the skill of classification is, and that is a good reinforcement of that scientific skill. And then with all of our different subject areas, we have songs about various scientific concepts. There's songs about the water cycle, there's songs about electricity. So any kind of scientific concept that they're learning in the classroom, there are many songs that you can teach for your melody unit or for your rhythm unit that kind of reinforce that concept. So let's talk about some best practices for alignment. And this is not just for science alignment, this is for science, social studies, math, literacy, anything you can think of. So the very first one I want to reinforce is that you don't have to sacrifice your own concept, standards, and objectives in order to align your music class with these other subject areas. We're not expecting you to become a math teacher. We're not expecting you to become a science teacher. Heaven help my students if they ask me to be a math teacher. It is just not my skill, and they would be worse off with me as their math teacher. But I know when to bring in those mathematical concepts and skills into my classroom. So my main job as a music educator is my music standards and teaching music to my students. This is just kind of something that you can bring in if you're kind of wondering, what kind of song should I use? Maybe this is something that you can consider kind of searching out. Or if you have those small moments in your class, like in math, finding the age of death of the composer, those are just small moments that you can take to bring in those other subject areas. Another best practice is to align skills as well as standards. So the last example I gave was the skill of classification. So there might not be, again, a specific standard about that vocabulary, but the skill of classification is there. So if you're wondering about aligning, you can think of it in both of those ways. This is another big one that I've said throughout these different segments, is that even though there may be a specific standard that's taught at a specific moment or taught at a specific grade level, doesn't mean that you can't make connections with any grade level in that concept and any subject area at any time. It doesn't have to be an entire lesson about the science of sound. You can make those connections at any point with any grade level. As I've shown you several times, you can find specific standards on the georgiastandards.org website. There's different places that you can look. And last but not least, a really good resource is to consult with the classroom teachers and subject area teachers in your own building, not only about what standards and concepts they teach, but also when they teach them in their instructional calendar and potential ideas for collaboration. So for example, my 4th grade teachers always do a project when they're teaching about the science of sound where they have the students create their own instruments And I collaborate with the teachers, and I also collaborate with the students to help them think about different ways that instruments can be made and instruments can make sounds. So there's a lot of opportunities to directly impact what they're doing in their classroom, in your music classroom, for the benefit of the students, that they're making those connections all over the place and noting. And it kind of helps us too in having them realize that music is a valid subject area that helps support all these other things they're learning. So these last two topics have been really fun for me. I would love to hear any other ideas that you have for aligning what we do as music educators with any other subject area. And I hope that you have gotten some new ideas from this. See you soon.